For those of you that are new to the channel, this is the BATLWGN. It's a 2022 Mercedes-Benz Sprinter 3500 XD. It's got tons of modifications, and we're about to install one of the most luxurious things that you can have in your house inside my van. It's from a company called VanLifeTech, and we're going over to Main Line Overland as per usual. Let's go. This is Cody from VanLifeTech. He flew in from Oregon to come help us with the install on this van. Right now, he's just getting everything opened up. There's a lot of components to this, and they ship it from the West Coast, so he's just making sure that everything's good to go. Once we confirm everything is good to go, we start removing the factory floor. It did a decent job while it was in there, but it is time to get it out of the van and move on to something much, much better. One of the things I like to do on more complicated projects is look at the individual components. This is a fluid-to-air heat exchange unit, and it's really well put together. It's really well thought out. I'm pretty excited about it. That gray tank is the expansion tank for the entire system. And this little football-sized thing is the actual heater/boiler that heats the fluid that travels through the van. It's really small, and that means this whole system is pretty efficient. And this even smaller thing is a fluid-to-fluid heat exchanger. This is how the hot water is created in the van. There isn't a separate water heater or anything like that. This little thing, combined with the rest of the system, handles it and is nearly instantaneous when the system is running. That's pretty freaking cool. And then we have the proprietary control box that makes everything work together. And now that we have a basic understanding of some of the components, it was time to move on to the prep work. And that basically means sanding the high spots on the floor so that we can get good adhesion when we're gluing down the subfloor. And then after the sanding is done, you guessed it, we can move on to applying glue and then installing the insulated subfloor. What I find interesting about the way they designed this subfloor is that it goes together a bit like a puzzle piece. Everything has a specific spot to go in the van for each specific van layout. So a 144, a 170, a 170 extended, they all use specific pieces, and it goes together in a very, very nice way. One of the other interesting things that they do is leave a bunch of material that overhangs the step so that you can go back and trim to fit for your particular build. I think this is a really smart way to handle it. I'm not sure if everybody else does this, but I do like that VanLifeTech does it. And now that the subfloor is in, we can start mapping out where everything's going to fall inside the van. You can see Cody is kind of doing some planning, as we call it, gazintas, and trying to figure out how things are going to be laid out. Once all that's figured out, using a very long drill bit, there's a pilot hole drilled all the way through the floor to make sure everything's lined up, and then continue the install. The next step is to install a reflective barrier on top of the subfloor to make sure most of the heat gets reflected back up into the van. Moving on from there, the top floor starts getting assembled. It's, again, sort of a puzzle piece. Everything has a very specific place to go. And after that, the lines can start being installed. VanLifeTech uses what's called PEX tubing, PEX. This is a polyethylene tube that is semi-flexible and works great in a scenario like this, where you're snaking it back and forth under the floor of a van. And with the magic of editing, the floor is installed. Cody is then moving on to using a metallic tape. It's almost like a flashing tape to seal up any of the joints in the floor to prevent anything from getting in and causing abrasion issues or any issues with the tubing at all. This also will spread the heat a little bit as it rises up through the floor, but that's not really the point. It's more about sealing it up correctly. And then, using one of the largest hole saws I've ever seen, a giant gaping hole is put through the floor of my van to have a pass-through from the heater and some sensors below. Yes, the heater is mounted outside the van, and that gives it a way up into the van. Pretty simple, but terrifying nonetheless, seeing that giant hole in my van. And we're going to skip ahead a little bit. This is the final install of the heater, the pump for the fluid, and of course that cute little muffler. And here you can see the lines forward of that for an ambient outside air temperature sensor, as well as the fuel pump coming out of the diesel tank itself and running back to the heater unit. And as we're getting closer to finishing the install, Pat is being educated on how the plumbing needs to go for the entire system inside the van. Obviously, this stuff is in the floor, but there is some plumbing that goes on to complete the loop. Now, this is not very simple to follow visually through a video, so I'm just going to glaze past it, but it is super freaking cool, and maybe if we run into each other one day, I'll show you in person. And then the system is actually filled with the fluid that does the heavy lifting in terms of heat. This is a glycol and water mixture. And of course, we had to make sure that there were no leaks, make sure everything was functioning correct. And yes, we did test it, but you can't see heat through a video, so I'm just going to skip over that. This is some sensor stuff, blah, 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 wiring stuff that's boring to watch. Let's talk about it. So here is how it sits as of today. You can see this overhang. We have some supports in there for temporary stuff. I'm going to lift up the cardboard. You can kind of see there some of the tape. It doesn't matter. The idea here is that the cardboard is to protect everything, make sure nothing gets messed up before we put the lawn seal, the final like flooring material, down on top of this. So here's the final install of this. This is going to go inside cabinets. So I'm going to try to explain how the fluid moves through everything, okay? So it comes up out of the heater and then comes into this heat exchanger for the hot water. That gets serviced first. Then it goes into the air exchange unit, and then it goes down into the floor and goes back and forth and back and forth, and finally ends up back into the loop. And just because I didn't get a chance to show it earlier, here is the subfloor. It has a foam layer in the middle, and then here is the top floor. So you have this bottom layer, that's your subfloor that everything goes on. This is what gets glued down. And then the top floor that holds the tubing, sandwiches the tubing down, that is attached to this. So this is all one complete unit here. I just wanted to show you guys what that is made of. And the thing that is the most amazing to me about all this is you really only have to interact with one thing. You set the temperature, and then the system just handles the rest. When it comes to hot water, assuming the system is on, it's already running through that heat exchanger, so your heat is just going to be almost instantaneous. It'll flush out the line, and then you'll have hot water right there. Now, in warmer months when you do need hot water, it will take a little bit longer, but goodness gracious, this is freaking amazing. And I know someone is going to ask, well, how do you know where the lines are when you have flooring material down? Just like this, you know, we've got cardboard, you can't see where the lines are. Well, we marked where all the lines are and some measurements on the rear of the floor. So even when that's covered in trim, we can pull the trim, make sure we know where our lines are. That way we're not going to put anything down through there when we're installing cabinetry and wiring and blah, 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 blah. We know where everything is. It's wonderful. It's already marked out for us. And unlike a lot of the other heated floor solutions that you can get, the reason I think this one is the best is because your primary heat source is the floor. The air exchanger that you can see right there, that's a secondary thing. The primary heat source is the floor. So everything in here heat soaks. Everything in here comes from the floor up. I mean, it's a wonderful thing. And honestly, the worst part of this is that the warmer months are just starting to get here. I'm in the northeast of the US, and the warmer months are starting to roll in right as we're getting this installed in the van, just like the colder months were starting to roll in as the AC went on the roof. I haven't gotten a chance to try that AC at all yet. We also don't have power in the van yet. There are so many steps to come to sort of complete this and button everything up. This is one of the most expensive things that will be installed on the van. That flooring system was not cheap. However, the functionality of it is freaking amazing. I've seen videos from the guys at the company that show this thing functioning, and you can see it on their social media in very, very cold temperatures, in blizzards and all that, and it's toasty 70 degrees in the van. That right there is amazing. You can take your shoes off, you don't have to worry about it, put your feet right on the floor. I'm telling you, this is something that I'm very excited to try out. It likely won't happen. It won't get the full test very likely until next year, next fall, next winter. But
The foundation is set, and that is important. Of course, a big shout out to Cody for coming over to the East Coast to get it done. Big shout out to Main Line Overland for continuing to support this build. I'm telling you, this is going to be amazing. If you need something for overlanding, they're the people to call, especially on the East Coast. Like they got you covered, don't you worry. If you want to see more of the BATLWGN build series, be sure to get subscribed and follow us right here on YouTube, Instagram, etc., wherever you're watching this. And as always, thank you all for watching. We'll see you soon.